Elected Republicans are now so committed to corruption that they're rubbing it in your face. So listen to this. This is from The Intercept. Less than 6 hours after its passage by the Republican-controlled state legislature, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder signed into law this week a measure that, effective immediately, allows candidates to raise unlimited sums of money for super PACs, which can then promptly spend that money supporting those candidates or attacking their rivals. It also allows consultants to simultaneously work for a campaign and a super PAC at the same time, making a joke of the supposed independence of the two groups. It's a brazen move for Snyder, who is term limited out of office in 2018, to so fully embrace the post-Citizens United world dominated by big money super PACs. Watchdogs warn that the law, which they have described as Citizens United on steroids, effectively creates an end run around the state's limits on campaign contributions and further obliterates the already thin line that is supposed to maintain super PAC independence from candidates. That opens the door for the state's wealthy donors to wield even more influence over the political system. Okay, so let me explain what this means in a little more detail. There have been multiple U.S. Supreme Court cases from the 1970s and onward that have basically ruled money equals free speech and then reaffirmed that and pushed that idea even further. So the way that it worked up until recently, and what federal courts and the Supreme Court has decided, is that, okay, there are still some limits. There's very few and far between, but there are some limits on how much fundraising can be done for an individual candidate, for a campaign, and for a party. So there's still some limits there. Where there are no limits are super PACs. Super PACs, what they're supposed to be, are what's called independent expenditures. So, in other words, if you're a candidate and you're running for office, a super PAC can be a super PAC that's created to try to get you elected. But under current federal election law, the super PAC cannot coordinate with you or your campaign staff. The super PAC has to be totally independent and separate, and they can be, their whole purpose could be to try to get you elected, but legally they cannot coordinate with you because, according to the way the law works right now, it does mean corruption if you are working with the people who can raise unlimited sums of money from whoever. But apparently, and don't ask me how they came to this wacky decision, which makes no sense, but apparently, according to the Supreme Court, it is corruption over a certain amount of money if they try to donate to a candidate or a campaign or a party. So there's a personal cap, a personal limit, if they're donating to a campaign, an individual candidate, or a party, but there are no caps if there's donations to a super PAC. So you see the problem here is that that's incoherent. It's like, oh, if I give money directly to you over a certain limit, that's corruption, because, under a certain limit, it's not. And by the way, the cap is super high, too. Let's be clear about that. But if I give to this group that's still trying to get you elected but not affiliated with you, well, then that's not corruption. And what ends up happening? What ends up happening is you have people, yes, coordinating from the campaign and the super PAC. It always happens. Some of the presidential candidates on the Republican side were brazenly doing it. So remember, there was this big scandal about how Jeb Bush, it was obvious he was going to run, but he hadn't officially announced yet. And people are going, why has he not officially announced yet? You want to know why? Because until he announced it, he was illegally allowed to go around and raise money for his super PAC. We didn't have to worry about any campaign limits. So we can go beg corporations and beg billionaires to give him as much money as possible as long as he hadn't officially announced yet. So he went around raising money for his super PAC, and then after he raised a tremendous amount of money for his super PAC, he said, now I'm announcing. And then he wasn't legally allowed to directly raise money for a super PAC anymore. He had to raise for his campaign, which had more limits. But now what they're doing in Michigan is they're saying, yeah, federal law, schmederal flaw, Supreme Court schmoleem flort, I don't care about any of that. Now we are making a state law that says that you can work with your super PAC and raise unlimited amounts of money. So this is the literal last stop in the money is speech bonanza and the openly corrupt legalized bribery bonanza. That's what this is, where they say, that's it. No, that's it. No limits in any circumstance, none for party, none for campaigns, none for individual candidates, none for super PACs, none for anything. You're allowed to coordinate and you're allowed to raise as much money as possible. So this really is a total and complete oligarchy. There's not even the pretense now of any rules under this law. Now, apparently, Rick Scott and the Republicans in Michigan don't understand how federal law works and don't understand how the Supreme Court works because the Supreme Court said, look, if you go beyond what they outlined, which is unlimited donations for super PACs, but there's still some rules for candidates and individuals and parties. They say, well, if you go beyond this, it is corruption, and that would be illegal. But the Michigan governor and his idiot Republican friends are so stupid and so corrupt that they don't understand that the way the federal law works, that law and the Supreme Court's decision overrides their already null and void state law, but they're trying it anyway. And then what's going to happen? What'll happen is this will, yet again, there will be lawsuits over it. It'll rise through the court system. It might end up at the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court is even more conservative this time around, they might actually decide, yes, there's no limits for anything ever. So yes, you could work hand in hand with your super PAC. You could raise unlimited amounts of money, and that's totally fine. We live in a fucking oligarchy. We live in an oligarchy. In the Citizens United decision, there was, one of the Supreme Court justices said, not only is politicians raising money from private individuals or corporations, not only is that not corruption, that's not even the appearance of corruption. That's what they said. How out of touch are these guys? Or how much are they just lying to you? Because what? It's a fucking coincidence that ExxonMobil gives tremendous campaign contributions every year, and then they end up getting a $4 billion subsidy? It's coincidence that the big banks give a lot in donations every year, political contributions every year, and they get $80 billion every year in terms of a subsidy, a giant corporate welfare check. The military-industrial complex functioning perfectly, where they give money to politicians, then politicians give them no-bid contracts, even when we don't even need to make fucking tanks, for example. There's countless tanks sitting in the Nevada desert. Why? Because of corruption in the military-industrial complex. That's all coincidence. According to the Supreme Court, not only is that not corruption, it's not even the appearance of corruption. Our country is officially an oligarchy, officially a kleptocracy, and Michigan specifically said, we'll be the first to get us fully there. We already function like an oligarchy, according to a study from a few years back. We already function like one, but we're not one yet in name. In Michigan, they're saying, yeah, pretty much in name too now. We need to get money out of politics. I don't care whether it's through Move to Amend. I don't care whether it's through Wolfpack. I don't care whether it's through Represent.us, but we need to get money out of politics. And Justice Democrats will fight for that too, by the way. Of course. It's one of our most important issues. JusticeDemocrats.com/fight, because this garbage cannot stand.